I'm Garen Carlin, Mosses Creek Outdoors. I'm going to tell a little story here involving history, talking about some of the old folks back many years ago, what they used to have to do for heat, and how they stayed warm when it got so cold during the winter time. You know, back in the day, people used to have to worry about one thing come wintertime: how they was going to stay warm. It was to burn wood, and they had to use wood in several different ways. There was a good many folks lived in some houses and lived together, and they just had to think way ahead on things, you know, how they's going to get by, how they's going to make things work. But you know, old cold winter would come, and they'd see sights like this here. It'd get so cold, and I remember some older family members told me years ago, back then, in them days, once it turned cold, it stayed cold for months. It didn't ever warm back up just a few days and then cool off again. It stayed cold. You know, I remember old stories my granddaddy used to tell me about when he was growing up, how his grandma and grandpa burned wood in the fireplace. He said he'd get home from school and he'd go down to his grandpa's and he'd have to roll the big stick wood in the fireplace back to the back, and he'd have to bring in a new stick and roll in front. And he said that stick would last until he got home from school the next day. That was a big thing back in the day. It was one of the main necessities. A lot of people burnt in fireplaces. A lot of people just used no wood type heater. There was some old coal heaters back many years ago, but most of the people in my family, as I ever knowed of, burnt wood. But it was just something they had to do. You know, the heat was something they had to have. You know, they had to get by, and they had to have the heat. And you know, another thing was, everybody always enjoyed sitting down to eat. And to prepare their food, they had to have the wood also. They had to have the wood to operate their old wood cook stoves. I remember so many old stories from my grandparents talking about their parents and their grandparents preparing old meals for so many years on the old wood cook stoves. A lot of history and a lot of old good times to remember. Also, a lot of good food back then. Biscuits, gravy, old-fashioned chocolate gravy. Everybody always believed in that chocolate gravy. They loved it. And when it come to the biscuits, folks always said that they just fixed biscuits by the pans full. The last thing on your mind would be is how many biscuits you eat. You just eat all you could hold then. And something else back then, when my triple great-grandmother would get ready to prepare a meal, she would send my triple great-grandfather outside to get a few little small sticks of wood to go in the old cook stove. And the old dog they had back then, he would pick up one stick of wood in his mouth. And his treat for bringing in that one stick of wood was a fresh biscuit. But when the time come to cut wood, you'd see something like this here. It wasn't no easy job. It was hard labor. But it was something that just had to be done. You had to do it to get by. All the folks all throughout the country, they used to sharpen all their own blades. They had a special technique they had to go by to get all the teeth on the saw just right. They done it all time, and they was professionals. And splitting, it was a big job and a hard job, but it was another part that had to be done. You had to get it down to the size you needed it. Later on in time, some folks was fortunate enough to get one of these. This is an old-fashioned cutoff saw that fits on the back of a tractor, and it's powered off the PTO shaft coming from the tractor. What folks ended up having one of these, they said they could cut wood up in a hurry. They would cut the wood up in longer stock and sticks, several feet long, and hold it up to this saw, and they could cut it up in a hurry, just like this right here. But again, there's so much history, more than we'll ever know, and so much hard work. To go along with that hard work, I believe most people was happy. Folks had a hard life, and times was hard, but they just knew the way things was, what they'd have to do to get by. And all you little backcountry schools, they all relied upon wood heat. There was wood heaters in all of them. This right here is Shiloh School, just right here near. My grandfather and several other family members went to school here, and he said they would take turns ever so often. The students would be one student to get to the school earlier than everybody else, to be able to fire in the heater in the wintertime so it'd be warm for when the other kids come in. The Shiloh School building, it had windows all the way down the west side of the building, and I'm sure they used that to their advantage for generating heat into the building from the sun. This is the heater here that I still use nowadays. It's so enjoyable. Brings back a lot of memories of what I've heard in the past too. Even still today, it's the most #1 reliable heat that you can have. Just so much history, so many times to remember. I've enjoyed telling this story, and I appreciate you watching. Until next time, I'm Garen Carlin, Mosses Creek Outdoors, and I'll see you.